Let's be honest, for a lot of us, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child was a huge disappointment. The plot holes, the characters acting in ways they never would. It just didn't feel like the Harry Potter we grew up with. There was so much promise in a story about the next generation, but it all got buried under a confusing mess of time travel and character assassination. It felt less like a real continuation and more like badly written fan fiction. So today, we're fixing it. I'm rewriting The Cursed Child from the ground up to tell a new story that actually feels like it belongs in the canon. A story that honors the legacy of the original series and gives the next generation the adventure they deserve. This is my version of what should have happened.
Part 1. The problem. Why the Cursed Child needs fixing. Before we can build something new, we have to understand why the original is so broken. The issues with Cursed Child really boil down to 3 things: catastrophic plot failures, blatant character assassination, and a complete disregard for the lore of the wizarding world. Let's start with the plot, or as I call it, the Time Turner catastrophe. The entire story is driven by Albus and Scorpius using a time turner to go back and save Cedric Diggory. This one decision completely unravels the Harry Potter universe for 2 big reasons. First, it completely rewrites the rules of time travel. In Prisoner of Azkaban, time travel is a closed loop. Harry and Hermione don't change the past, they fulfill it. They were always there to cast the Patronus and save Buckbeak. There aren't any alternate realities. But in Cursed Child, that elegant model is thrown out the window for a chaotic anything-goes approach. One trip to the past creates a whole new timeline. Suddenly, Hermione is a bitter teacher who never married Ron. Then, Voldemort has one and Harry is dead. These alternate realities pop up and disappear so fast that nothing has any real stakes. Second, the fact that these powerful time turners even exist is a massive plot hole. Remember the battle in the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix? The Ministry's entire stock of time turners was destroyed. That was a big deal. It meant you couldn't just keep going back to fix your mistakes. But in Cursed Child, a new, sarcastically, way more powerful time turner just shows up, one that can send you back years, which breaks the 5-hour limit J.K. Rowling herself later established. The play basically gives the characters a magical undo button that wrecks every rule we thought we knew. And even if you could get past the broken time travel, the plot holes don't stop. Albus and Scorpius somehow brew Polyjuice Potion in a few minutes. Anyone who's read Chamber of Secrets knows Hermione spent a whole month brewing it in a bathroom. In another trip, the boys visit Godric's Hollow and just see the Potter's house, a place that should have been invisible to them because of the Fidelius charm. Peter Pettigrew was the secret keeper, and he definitely didn't invite them over. These aren't just little nitpicks, they're fundamental breaks in the world's logic. But the story's worst crime is what it does to the characters we love. This is the character assassination. Let's start with Harry Potter. In The Cursed Child, he isn't the kind, empathetic hero we know. He's a cold, overworked bureaucrat and honestly a terrible father. Now, it makes sense that he'd struggle to connect with his son, Albus. Harry never had a father figure himself, but the play takes that relatable conflict and pushes it into something cruel. In a moment of anger, Harry tells his son, "Well, there are times I wish you weren't my son." Let's be crystal clear. The Harry Potter from the books would never say that. This is the boy whose deepest desire in the Mirror of Eridus was just to be with his parents. This is the man who named his son after 2 of the bravest men he ever knew. Harry's entire character is built on his capacity to love. Having him say something so monstrous is a complete betrayal of his journey. He even threatens Professor McGonagall. It's unrecognizable. And then there's Ron Weasley. Oh, Ron. What did they do to you? In the books, Ron is the heart of the trio. He's loyal, brave, and the group's emotional anchor. In The Cursed Child, he's been flattened into a pathetic, one-dimensional jokester who runs a gag shop and seems to only exist for cheap laughs. The movies started this trend of sidelining Ron, but the play finishes the job, reducing him to shallow comic relief. And Hermione Granger doesn't fare much better. Sure, she's the Minister for Magic, which is great, but the plot undermines her. In one timeline where she never married Ron, she becomes a cruel, bitter teacher. This implies her entire happiness depended on her romantic relationship, which is a huge disservice to the brilliant and fiercely independent character we know. And that brings us to the villain, Delphi, the secret daughter of Voldemort and Bellatrix. This is easily the most fan-fiction-y twist in the whole story. Voldemort, the man who split his soul into 7 pieces to live forever and saw love as a weakness, would never want an heir. His goal was to conquer death himself, not pass on a legacy. The idea that he'd pause his quest for power to have a child goes against everything we know about him. Even poor Cedric Diggory isn't safe. In one alternate timeline, Cedric, the noble, fair Hufflepuff, becomes a Death Eater just because he was embarrassed in the Triwizard Tournament. This ignores the strong character he showed in Goblet of Fire. This is the kid who offered to replay a Quidditch match Harry missed and who insisted on sharing the Triwizard Cup. Suggesting a moment of humiliation would turn him into a magical fascist isn't just an insult to his character, it's just lazy writing. So we're left with a story that ignores its own rules, characters who act like strangers, and a villain whose existence makes no sense. It's time to start over. Alright, so here's my version. The goal is simple. Create a story that feels like a true 8th Harry Potter adventure. We're keeping the good parts, Albus being a Slytherin, his friendship with Scorpius Malfoy, and the pressure of a famous last name. But we are throwing out the time travel and the secret Voldemort baby entirely. Our story starts right where the Deathly Hallows epilogue left off, platform 9 3/4. Albus is terrified of being sorted into Slytherin, and Harry reassures him, telling him he was named for 2 headmasters, and one of them, a Slytherin, was the bravest man he ever knew. It's a tender moment, but the fear in Albus's eyes is real. On the Hogwarts Express, Albus meets Scorpius Malfoy. The vicious rumor that Scorpius is secretly Voldemort's son has followed him his whole life and left him isolated. Albus, already feeling like an outsider, sees a kindred spirit. He doesn't see a Malfoy or a Death Eater's son. He just sees another kid who's as scared as he is. Their friendship starts right then and there. And of course, Albus is sorted into Slytherin, a Potter in Slytherin. For Albus, it's a nightmare. For Harry, it's a pang of worry, but he remembers his own words and knows he has to support his son. The first few years at Hogwarts are tough for Albus. He's constantly compared to his hero father and his Gryffindor brother, James. His only real friend is Scorpius Malfoy. Meanwhile, Rose Granger Weasley is standoffish, echoing her dad's old prejudice against Malfoys. But as she watches Albus and Scorpius, she starts to see their genuine friendship, and it challenges everything she thought she knew. Our new plot really kicks off in their 4th year. Instead of a time-turner, the central conflict is a mystery, bringing us back to that classic Harry Potter formula. It starts with strange things happening at Hogwarts. Ancient protective wards start failing, magical artifacts tarnish overnight, and whispers start spreading about a long-lost dark object, the Obsidian Mirror. Legend says the Obsidian Mirror doesn't show you your desires like the Mirror of Erised. It shows you what you could have been. Whispers. It preys on regret, twisting alternate paths into beautiful, poisonous lies. It was believed to be destroyed, but now someone is trying to rebuild it inside Hogwarts. Our villain isn't Delphi, it's a new threat, a charismatic leader of a pure-blood supremacist group called the Augury. They believe Voldemort failed by focusing on brute force. They think true power comes from psychological warfare. Their plan is to use the rebuilt Obsidian Mirror on key ministry figures like Harry and Hermione to paralyze them with regret and make the government crumble from within. The leader of the Augury is Corvus Lestrange, a previously unknown cousin of Bellatrix's husband, Rodolphus. He's clever and manipulative and has infiltrated Hogwarts as a visiting professor for the study of ancient runes, giving him the perfect cover to search for the mirror. Albus and Scorpius get pulled into the mystery when Scorpius, a history whiz, finds a coded reference to the mirror. At the same time, Albus starts having unsettling nightmares about being a celebrated Gryffindor, only to see this version of himself as arrogant and cruel. He's feeling the mirror's psychological poison. Harry's scar does start to hurt again, but it's not Voldemort, it's psychosomatic, a manifestation of his trauma, triggered by the rising tension and whispers of a new dark movement. It's his fear that the peace he fought for is about to break. As the boys dig deeper, they realize the mirror's pieces are hidden in places around Hogwarts, tied to great historical regret. They have to solve riddles and puzzles, just like the original trio, and they find an unlikely ally in Rose. After she gets saved by Albus and Scorpius during a magical disturbance, she's forced to work with them and finally sees their bravery. Her prejudice shatters and she becomes their Hermione, using her research skills to help piece together the clues. Now, what about the original trio? They aren't the main characters, but their roles are crucial and, more importantly, true to who they are. Harry, as head of magical law enforcement, is investigating the failing wards. When he finds out what Albus is up to, his first instinct is to shut it down to protect him. This leads to their big argument. Albus accuses Harry of not trusting him, and Harry, frustrated, doesn't say he wishes Albus wasn't his son. Instead, he says, "I just want you to be safe. I look at you and see all the dangers I faced, and I can't bear you going through the same thing." It's a conflict born from love and fear, not cruelty. Ron is now a seasoned Auror working with Harry, and he's not just comedy relief. He's the wise, grounded uncle. He pulls Albus aside and tells him stories about his dad when they were kids, not the hero stories, but the ones where Harry was scared and insecure. He tells him, "Your dad isn't a statue, Albus. He's just a man who had to grow up too fast. The reason he's so hard on you is because he loves you so much he's terrified of messing it up." Hermione, as Minister for Magic, is brilliant and competent, dealing with the political fallout of the augury movement. She trusts Harry's instincts, but is bound by rules and procedure, representing the adult political world the kids have to navigate. Draco Malfoy also has a key role. When he learns what Albus is up to, he goes straight to Harry, not to threaten him, but to offer a reluctant alliance. He says, "Potter, I don't care about our past. My son is in danger. You know these pure-blood fanatics will see him as a traitor just for being friends with your son. I know how they think. I can help." Draco uses his knowledge of dark arts and pure-blood families to provide crucial information, finally completing his redemption arc. The climax happens in a hidden chamber beneath the Slytherin common room where Professor Lestrange is reassembling the mirror. Albus, Scorpius, and Rose find him, and he tries to tempt Albus. He activates the mirror, showing Albus a vision of himself as a hero who finally earns his father's unconditional love. "This is what you want, isn't it?" Lestrange whispers. Albus is mesmerized for a second, but then he looks at his trapped friends, remembers what's real, and rejects the vision, shouting that his friends and family are his true strength. The fight breaks out. The students are outmatched, but fight cleverly. Just in the nick of time, Harry, Ron, and Draco burst in. The final battle isn't just Harry saving the day, it's two generations fighting side by side. Harry and Draco duel Lestrange's followers while Ron works on dismantling the mirror's magic. The final confrontation comes down to Albus and Lestrange. Working together, Albus and Scorpius trick Lestrange into seeing his own reflection. He sees his greatest fear, being a forgotten failure, and the psychological shock incapacitates him. In the aftermath, Harry finds Albus in the hospital wing. He doesn't lecture him, he just sits down and apologizes for letting his fear control him. He says, "I was wrong, Albus. I spent so much time worrying about you becoming like me that I failed to see you were becoming your own person, and I couldn't be prouder." The story ends a year later on platform 9 3/4. Albus and Harry are laughing together. Scorpius and Draco share a comfortable smile nearby. Rose joins Albus and Scorpius, and the three of them get on the train, not just the children of heroes, but heroes in their own right, ready for their next adventure.
Whew. And that's it. That's my version of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. A version that, I hope, feels earned. By getting rid of the messy time travel, we get a focused mystery that lets the next generation shine. By keeping the original characters true to themselves, we honor their journeys and let them grow as parents and mentors. This version gets back to what made Harry Potter so special in the first place. The magic of Hogwarts, the power of friendship, and the idea that love and courage are the most powerful magic of all. It's a story about legacy, but it shows that legacy isn't about repeating the past, it's about learning from it to build a better future.
So what do you think? Is this a better continuation of the saga?
What would you have done differently? I'd love to read your ideas for fixing the cursed child in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. And if you enjoyed this and want to see more deep dives into the wizarding world, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Thanks so much for watching.